A new survey by society is more important than protecting free speech. Dan Coulter is an author and columnist and talk on free speech. She joins us today, protects her and me and the rest of us. So, Ann, is it really an either or? You can't have a diverse and inclusive country and keep the First Amendment?
Well, yes, of course you can. We've had it for a few hundred years. What was strange about the survey, which I noticed immediately when it landed in my inbox, and it was odd that the New York Times presented it as if, well, we've covered all the bases here, is that the only breakdown, they did age breakdowns, gender breakdowns, political party breakdowns, the only ethnic breakdown was black and white Americans. Do they think we're living in the 1950s? Because what is striking is this is, of course, another problem of immigration. Our two main immigrant groups, Hispanics and Asians, overwhelmingly, whether it's the Pew Research Center, Cato, all kinds of surveys done over the years show that white and black Americans overwhelmingly support both free speech and gun rights, and you have almost the reverse percentages with recent immigrants. I mean, this idea that people come to our country and suddenly think, oh, I understand. Yes, you have a right to speak, even if I disagree with you, and even if you're insulting the Prophet Muhammad. No, it doesn't work that way. So what you're seeing at places like Berkeley, white students are only 30% of the population at Berkeley. Asian students alone are 46%. That's more than black and white Americans combined. That's why you're getting the biggest attacks on free speech at places like Berkeley.
Well, so that's fascinating. So it's not a left-right thing as much as it's a new arrival versus born here thing. So then why wouldn't we be doing everything we can to inculcate our beliefs and understanding of our rights under our Constitution in people who just got here?
Yes, no, you're right. Well, because we have even among 11th generation Americans, these people called liberals, and they're as opposed to our fundamental freedoms as the newcomers are. But I mean, the ACLU has been surprisingly staunch on the issue of free speech, losing a lot of their donors, I might add, in the face of these recent attacks. But you would think that the ACLU would have an opinion on the importation of people adamantly opposed to the mission statement in their charter. I mean, we are looking at the death of America's fundamental freedoms, as you said in your introduction. Even England doesn't have free speech. Well, that's going to be it for America, both First Amendment and the Second Amendment, as this new generation of non-Americans grows up.
So why are our corporations abetting this, making it worse? Kroger, the grocery chain, announced today that it will no longer stock magazines with photographs of assault weapons. Not even clear how they're defining that or what an assault weapon is. But scary-looking guns are no longer allowed in photographs in Kroger. Since when are companies sort of piling on speech restrictions here?
Well, it's been at least since Trump has come along, maybe before then. But I return to my refrain. I don't care what your opinion is on free speech or guns or anything else, but please stop pretending you're a rebel. Please stop pretending you're fighting the man when you are just lockstep with corporate America. These new radicals we have, the resistance, they'll check with corporate America, Apple and Twitter, Facebook, and their professors to ask if they can wear a Question Authority t-shirt. Would that be okay?
Has there ever been a more obedient little cadre of robots than college students? Does anybody think, is anyone brave? Is anybody giving the finger to the man and speaking the truth? Where are those people? What happened?
Well, the good news is I'm following a lot of them on Twitter. I get the impression that we are creating, and the left is creating, without realizing it, this really hilarious and ferocious generation of right-wingers. These college students, they're listening to white privilege all day, every moment of every day. White heterosexual men are emerging from college, working at the moon, right-wingers. And they're a lot of fun to follow on Twitter. They're very funny.
I can't imagine why. There are unintended consequences to everything, apparently. Ann Coulter, thank you. point in the last 50 years, you know that American colleges are basically pretty liberal. But in the past 5 years or so, campuses seem to have been hit by a fever they haven't experienced since the 1960s. Instead of focusing on professional skills or the sweet treats of scholarship, millions of students and professors have made far-left politics their only reason for being at school. The result is this: everybody gets a safe space except for white men. They are hated and despised. What is this about exactly? Scott Fair is the author of a new book that considers it. It's called No Campus for White Men, and he joins us in the studio. Scott, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Tugger.
So the hysteria level's rising. That's not my imagination. I went to college at one point. It wasn't like this. What's changed?
Well, what's changed is that over the last 5 years, and it actually extends longer to that, but it's really gravitated toward in the last 5 years, is that identity politics and victimhood culture have taken over higher education. Basically, well, the 2 points is identity politics stress that basically all a person should care about is their own narrow group interests and the identity they ascribe to themselves, such as if I'm an African-American man, that's all my politics, and I only care about furthering the interests of my specific group, African-Americans.
Right.
And that's become dominant on campus because they encourage it through affirmative action and other procedures that encourages people to gravitate towards specific identities for more benefit. And then second, and more important in some ways, is victimhood culture, where everybody kind of competes to be the biggest victim. And a lot of people are like, well, why are all these young people trying to pretend to be victims? Nobody wants to be a victim, but the reason why they do that is because we assign moral status in the college moral culture that's being created to who's the bigger victim, who's more oppressed, who's more oppressed gets more status in that moral hierarchy created. And if you're privileged, then that's the worst thing that can happen. And say, like in an older moral culture, if you're like demonically possessed, that's the lowest. With this, it's like if you're privileged, that's the worst thing you can be. But being a victim is the best thing you can be. But
this is Paul's Dream Garage. This is not Paul. It's time to build your own dream garage. Lease a well-equipped CRV for $80 weekly at 3.99%.
when your victimhood isn't assigned based on socioeconomic status, you can be the son of a poor coal miner from West Virginia, and you're privileged, and you can be the son of a wealthy multimillionaire, but African-American, and you're oppressed, and that's how the system works.
There's so many ironies in all this. I mean, I guess the first one you sort of noted. I mean, everyone in college is privileged by definition. They're not working for a living. They're learning, which was considered a privilege for like 1,000 years. And the second point is that colleges were designed to be places where people studied universal truths and values rather than narrow and sectarian ones. Why the change? What brought this about? How did it get here?
Well, it is that it wants to pertain to these narrow interests, as I write in No Campus for White Men. It's about building. It's about It's about trying to get to the right views of these people.
Right.
It's trying to, if you have a narrow identity politics, if that's the core being of the political message on campus, everything is designed to please that type of system. So when you have an English course, the fact that Shakespeare and John Milton are the primary writers that are studying that course, that's a problem because they're white males. We need to have more diversity there because of identity politics. People are like, well, I feel left out because I'm reading Shakespeare or John Milton, even though they forget the universal message in those works,
right,
and the message and the great writing. They had said, well, we need to have somebody that reflects this current campus culture that we have. So that's why they kind of they push these type of things on college campus.
You know, I believe everything you say. I don't fully understand the psychology behind it or where it came from, but here's what I know for sure. It doesn't make you happy. We have a video from Yale. I think this is one of the exchanges that precipitated your book, that inspired you to write this. This is a Yale professor, and this is kind of what a lot of them are like. We can roll this.
Your position as an actor, do you understand that? Then
No, I don't agree with that.
Then why the you accept the position? Who the hired you?
I have a different
You
vision.
should step down. If that is what you think about being a professor, you should step down. It is not about creating an intellectual thing. It is not. You
Well,
understand?
that's just textbook hysteria, but it's also an expression of deep unhappiness. I mean, what was that about?
Absolutely. That, as you said, that inspired No Campus for White Men. That was about because the professor who was defending himself, who was surrounded and kind of undergoing an inquisition, his wife wrote a simple column saying, look, you shouldn't get all bent out of shape about cultural appropriating Halloween costumes. We know how terrible those can be. I mean, that's a real horror in our society if somebody dresses up in a Halloween costume that's considered cultural appropriation. And she merely said, like, look, you're college kids, you're going to do stupid things, just let it be, don't get out of shape about it. But that was like the worst thing that ever happened on this campus. It was like somebody wrote this horrific racist letter to the newspaper. That's how students treated it. And they took out all their anger upon this poor professor, who's actually a liberal himself, who actually sympathized with their cause, but they wouldn't even let him get his viewpoint heard. They just screamed at him and vented their anger. And it was all kind of this ritual humiliation that he was undergoing. And it was really quite shocking when it happened. And that's why it caught the national eye.
It's just so bizarre. Standing on this bucolic, leafy campus in New England Falls, $60,000 a year. None of them have jobs, and they're angry. It's so weird. No Campus for White Men is the book. Scott Greer is the author. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's go, people. Grab your whole family. We have to do this together? It's movie night at home. This is crazy!
I'm stoked you guys are here. So stoked.
Jumanji on Blu-ray today.
Own it. Welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. The Austin bomber is dead after killing himself with one of his own devices. Who was he exactly, and what inspired him to murder? We'll share everything we noticed ahead. Details are coming in. But first, a longer-term story, maybe more profound. Law and order is breaking down in the largest state in this country, California. The mayor of Oakland, Libby Schaaf, warned illegal immigrants ahead of a planned federal raid that allowed them to flee. And now 3 of those who did flee, all Mexican nationals, have been arrested for newly committed crimes that include robbery, DUI, and spousal abuse. All of this could have been avoided, of course, were it not for Libby Schaaf, the mayor of Oakland. She says she did nothing wrong. Watch.
And while I am very committed to being a law-abiding citizen, I feel confident that my sharing this information, because I did not receive it through official channels, is legal, and frankly, it's my ethical obligation. Residents should know that they do not have an obligation to open their doors if an ICE official knocks.
Joe Alioto Verniz is an attorney. He's running for San Francisco DA, and he joins us tonight. Joe, thanks for coming up.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So, 2 of these guys were wife beaters. What would you say to their wives?
2 of the guys that were arrested one of the guys had been convicted.
That is correct, and another has been charged subsequently for physically abusing his spouse after the mayor of Oakland allowed him to flee detention. So his wife was injured, according to police. What would you say to her?
Well, the bigger question is this. We are a law of nations, right? So if there is a lawful order to keep somebody or to hand somebody over to ICE, there is no evidence that any sanctuary city in the world, or in the United States rather, has not followed through with that lawful order. ICE is following up with these detention orders that are called detainers, and the problem is that these detainers are voluntary. They're not lawful orders, and so it's a little inflammatory to say that, oh, we're just handing these people over. If there were lawful orders, if there was better cooperation between the sheriff's department, then yeah, you're right. You would have.
But you're not describing what actually happened. What happened is the mayor of Oakland warned people, affirmatively warned them, so they could evade detention by federal immigration authorities. 3 of them, at least, went on to commit other crimes during the time that they would have been detained. They were warned by her, and one of them beat his wife. And so, among the many questions I have is, what would you say to her? She wouldn't have been beaten if the mayor of Oakland hadn't done that.
Tucker, there is no evidence that these people actually received the information that the mayor put out. There were 800 people that they were looking for. 232 were actually arrested. Now, I served on the Fugitive Recovery Enforcement Team for the City and County of San Francisco when I was with the police department, and 30% is really good. I mean, you would ask anybody that is on.
There's no evidence. Would that be your answer? Would that be the answer to the wife? It's that there's no evidence they heard what the mayor said. I mean, the truth is, the mayor did warn these people, whether they heard it or not. You're right, we don't know. But is that the risk we're willing to take? I mean, what do you think of that? They committed crimes. They would have been detained were it not for Libby Schaaf. That's something you're happy to defend?
No. What I'm defending is due process. Everybody is entitled to due process. The 14th Amendment, unfortunately for ICE, says that, even people that are here unlawfully are entitled to due process.
But so that doesn't matter, but that's a separate question. This is the mayor, quite apart from that question. Oh, is it really? So she warns them. She says, in effect, flee so you don't get caught. She has no legal or moral obligation to do that. She did that for political reasons, and this is the effect. People got away and went and committed other crimes. It's not about due process. It's about should elected officials be warning people so they don't get arrested by the feds. That's insane, most people would say. You don't think it is?
Look, the better question is, should these cities be cooperating with the feds? And under certain circumstances, I absolutely believe that they should be. And where there's a violent criminal, yes, there should be better cooperation between the feds. You'll find that a lot of these police departments, including San Francisco, has police officers that are embedded in federal task forces within the city. We do it for terrorism, we do it for other issues.
But these guys had priors.
This immigration issue... No, I get it. I absolutely get it. And
okay,
yes,
so just to be clear, you're not
convicted. These people should be arrested.
Okay.
They should be given their due process. If they're convicted, they should serve their sentences and sent out of the countries. Absolutely.
So maybe Democrats in the state shouldn't warn them before the cops come. That's it. I mean, we could have lots of debates about federal immigration law, but I think we both agree you shouldn't be telling criminals.
Hey, come. Let's send money to Dadi in India.
I will count.
Okay.
1, 2, 3.
With Money to India, customers can now transfer money in just 3 clicks. Select transaction, review, confirm and pay.
Thanks, beta.
So do the easy. Transfer money today. Visit moneytoindia.com or download the app. ICICI Bank Money to India. Transfer bharose ka.
Get out of town before you get busted. Here's the other question. It's not just about immigration.
Definitely not violent criminals. That's
when they were, actually. Armed robbery. As you said, one of those guys had a prior conviction for wife beating. I thought we were on the side of women here. Apparently not. But let me ask you this. Well, every illegal alien who's working in the state of California, if he's working for a company, is by definition committing fraud with the ID he's using. He's using fake documents. That's a felony. Is that not a big deal? It seems like a big deal post 9/11 to me. Is that a concern for you as someone running for DA, that someone's using fake documents, identification documents?
Listen, if it's a violation of federal law, the federal enforcement should definitely take over.
It's not a violation of California law. Wait, hold on. It's not a violation of California law to use a fraudulent ID for the purposes of getting a job or doing anything else. That's cool in California. I can do that.
Well, actually, in San Francisco, if you are not a U.S. citizen, you can get a California ID. So you don't have to use fraudulent IDs for your job.
Oh, yes, you do. Yes, you do, because you need to produce a Social Security number, and if you're here illegally, you can't do that. No, you can't get a federal Social Security number.
You can't produce a Social Security number that is accurate or reflective.
That is true. You're going to use a fraudulent one, and every one of the... Okay, but that's not a problem for you. You feel like, hey, hands off. Someone's using a stolen ID, committing identity theft, a fake federal document in California. It's like, you know what, it's not our business. Is that what you're saying?
No, identity theft is an entirely different subject. But federal immigration enforcement or federal Social Security law is not the priority of San Francisco.
Apparently not.
Or the San Francisco...
Okay, well, I know there are a lot, and I'm going to think through. I'm going to call you and find out what laws I can break as an American citizen. Not many, I bet. Not as many as the illegals get to, it doesn't seem like.
That's not true. I understand you're a local boy from here in San Francisco anyway. When does the prodigal son come back home?
I don't know if I dare. Joe, good to see you tonight. Thank you.
Good to see you too, Tucker.
Not every leader in the state of California is trying to undo or sabotage federal law. Dave Harrington is mayor of Aliso Viejo. He wants the city to opt out of the new sanctuary state law, and he joins us tonight. Mr. Mayor, thanks for coming on. So tell us the position it puts you in as the leader of your city when the Attorney General of California says it's a crime for you to comply with federal law. Where does that leave you?
Yeah, it puts me in a really untenable position, Tucker, because I am responsible for 50,000 people in my city. I'm responsible for their safety, and that's how I feel. So you're telling me I cannot enforce the law. And to your prior guest, listen to the pretzels they have to tie themselves into to justify this sanctuary state. It's ridiculous. It makes us less safe, and that is the problem. And we got to start pushing back on this stuff, or we're gonna ruin this state completely.
So if you're an elected official, by definition, your first job, your only job is to look out for your voters, for the citizens who elected you. What does this say about the priorities of the leaders of the state of California, that they seem to be putting foreign nationals here illegally over and ahead of the safety of California citizens? What does that say about them?
It says that they're far more interested in people that do drugs, criminals, illegal aliens, and all the rest over the interests of law-abiding, tax-paying citizens. That's what it says.
So, I mean, how can a government like that continue? I mean, basically, the state has declared war on its own citizens. I mean, by its behavior. I don't think that's an overstatement.
Right, but only the law-abiding citizens. They're not declaring war on the criminals at all. They want to let them out and just roam free. And you expect even these violent crimes, Prop 57, is to let the Violent Felons Out of Prison Early Act. There's just a whole host of crimes that are listed in that particular section that aren't considered violent crimes under the penal code, and those people are eligible for early parole. We get 10,000 sex offenders that are eligible for early parole because of that law. So it's an untenable position to be in.
How does it, you sound like by your accent you're from California. As you look at your state over the course of your lifetime, how does it make you feel?
I'm not from California. I'm actually from Maine. Not missing the snow.
Couldn't have got that more wrong. Well, your accent sounds like Southern California.
Well, I've been here since I was 6, but my dad's in the Navy, so we traveled around a little bit. But I've grown up here essentially since I was 6 years old, and I'll tell you the difference is astonishing. We've gone from a law and order kind of state to just a free-for-all. If you want to be a criminal, come to California. That's kind of what the state legislature is doing. You want to be homeless? Come to California, because we're going to set you up in a tent city somewhere. It's just gotten ridiculous, Tucker. There's just no enforcement of the law here.
I'm sorry about that. Mr. Mayor, good luck fighting that.
Thanks, Tucker.
Appreciate it.
All right.
2 nights ago, we did a short segment on what has happened to a town called Hazleton, Pennsylvania. In just 15 years, thanks to mass immigration, Hazleton has gone from 2% Hispanic to majority Hispanic. Spanish is now the predominant language there. People who grew up in Hazleton feel lost when they come home. We learned all of that from National Geographic, which did a story on demographic change in the city of Hazleton. We told you about it because something similar is taking place all over the country. It's one of the reasons our society has become so volatile. We got a big reaction to that. A lot of people were raised in Hazleton wrote to thank us for shining a light on what's happening there. Many on the left started yelling. Some called for this show to be pulled off the air. President Obama's old flag, Dan Pfeiffer, described our segment as equal parts racist, dumb, and inaccurate. He didn't say how it was any of those things, because of course it wasn't. His real gripe was that it was true. People like Dan Pfeiffer hate the fact that conversations like this are even happening. Enforced silence is the key to their success, but no more. We're going to keep on this story because we think it's important. We won't be bullied, and we're going to take you again to Hazleton later in the week. I hope you'll watch us then. D.C. is planning for a march on guns, on your right to have one. There are some unusual people backing that effort. We'll tell you who's behind it next. Thousands of people are coming to Washington this weekend for an anti-gun march. They'll have an eclectic group of backers, including, believe it or not, Planned Parenthood. Why are they behind this? Trace Gallagher's been looking into it. He joins us. Hey, Trace.
Hi, Tucker. The primary March for Our Lives demonstration will happen this Saturday in D.C.
With sister marches across the country, the anti-gun event is being billed as for the kids, by the kids, meaning survivors of the Stoneman Douglas High School shooting. But the group acknowledges the kids have brought in support to help ensure the march is successful. That support is a compendium of gun control and progressive organizations, including Everytown for Gun Safety, the Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence, Planned Parenthood, and MoveOn.org. The March for Lives Action Fund is a 501c4 nonprofit that does not have to disclose its donors, though it is already publicly noted that Oprah Winfrey, George Clooney, Steven Spielberg, Jeffrey Katzenberg, and Gucci have each donated $500,000. Others are being asked to donate anonymously. Some of the money will go to the families of the victims of the Parkland school shooting, and some will pay for the march. The funding of other projects won't be known for months. The group can be involved in political activity as long as it's not the primary focus, says the law. Former President and Mrs. Obama sent a handwritten letter of support to Parkland teens, calling them an inspiration and lauding their resilience and their resolve.
Seriously?
Tucker. Thanks a lot, Trace. Appreciate it. Ryan Kleckner is a former Army Special Operations sniper. He's a firearms attorney and a columnist at The Federalist, and joins us. Ryan, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me on, Tucker.
So I think a lot of the people who are coming to the march this weekend are just upset about school shootings and maybe haven't thought about the agenda that undergirds the march. But the people organizing have a pretty clear legislative agenda. They'd like to do a lot of different things. And I want to run a couple of those things by you and get your quick responses as to whether you think that they would work. So the primary one is to ban the AR-15, or basically the whole category of semi-automatic rifles. Would that have stopped the school shootings we've seen?
No. So criminals don't obey laws. The definition of a criminal is somebody who doesn't obey a law. An inanimate object will not solve these problems. So, for example, the Maryland shooting yesterday didn't involve an AR-15. Virginia Tech, he used pistols. The Fort Hood massacre, he used pistols. 9/11, he used box cutters. The tool is not the problem. I mean, when you want to talk about tools, look at the Austin bombings that we just solved today. Bombs are already illegal. It didn't stop the bombings from happening.
But wait, but we know, because I saw it on CNN like all week, that high-capacity magazines are the core problem. So when we ban those, obviously this will end, right?
Of course, because during the assault weapons ban that started in 1994 and sunsetted in 2004, it did nothing to stop violent crime. In fact, today's levels of violent crime are 50% lower than they were at their peak in 1997, right in the middle of the same ban that banned those so-called dangerous high-capacity magazines.
Well, that doesn't make sense, because I know that places with strict gun control laws are much safer. I keep hearing that.
Yeah. So one of the things I love about our federalist system is that we can look at societies, little cities.
Within a week of signing up for Wealthsimple, I got an email from someone at the company, a very personal email. A couple months later, I got it. A text, and I had a phone call with someone from the company. Technology powers it, so it's those brains, but the reassurance of having a real person available, but knowing that that person also has next to them this like super brain that's smarter than they are, that's actually handling the money, is really comforting.
States and experiment with laws or ways of doing things. And I think before we have serious gun control legislation, we should look at Chicago and see how it's working there.
How is it working? Has it stopped? They banned shootings there, so there are no more shootings?
Solve the problem, right? No, it is the worst place we have going on right now in our country for shootings. We have not only just shootings, but violent crime. And Tucker, that's another problem. I don't know why we're focusing on shootings so much. Yes, they're horrible. They're bad. But we should be worried about violent crime. And when I talk to, and I'm trying to debate with an anti-gunner, one of the first things I'll ask them is, look, are you really trying to stop gun violence, or are you trying to stop all violence? And if they answer gun violence, okay, I get it, they're just trying to ban guns. But if they want to stop all violence, okay, let's have a serious discussion. Because just getting rid of guns, yes, maybe the use of guns will go down if you ban them. But just like Australia, your violent crime is either going to stay the same or go up because you have a bunch of unarmed victims.
So what about, I mean, one idea that seems to be gaining traction among even some Republicans is the idea of banning gun purchases under the age of 21. That doubtless would solve the problem.
You're either an adult at 18 or you're not. I think we need to make that distinction first before we even get to guns. And I get it that Democrats want younger voters because as people grow up, they tend to stop voting Democrat. But if you can be tried as an adult in a criminal case at 18, if you can join the military at 18, if you can enter into legal contracts at 18, then you're an adult. You should be able to buy a firearm. But let's just pretend that we're going to raise it to 21, and we're going to raise all the ages for all those things I just mentioned to 21 years old. That still would not have stopped 29 of the top 30 mass shootings that we've had in this country.
Well, I'm beginning I'm beginning to think maybe there's another agenda here, and it's not just about stopping school shootings. Right, and thank you for injecting some reason into this. It's been sorely lacking, so I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, a company called Cambridge Analytica has sparked mass panic on Twitter today, on the left more broadly, because it harvested Facebook user data. Turns out there was a very different reaction when the previous president's campaign did the same thing. I'll look back in just a moment. Well, Facebook's entire business model is built on harvesting your personal information, and yet somehow blue-check Twitter just learned this today and freaked out when they found out. Cambridge Analytica, a UK data firm hired by the Trump campaign, is mired in a scandal after a whistleblower claims the company misled Facebook users in order to collect their personal data. Well, that sounds very spooky, and was kind of spooky, actually, but weirdly, it wasn't that spooky 6 years ago. In 2012, the Obama administration found itself being congratulated by the media for how it gathered Facebook data in order to marshal votes. One Obama advisor says Facebook let them break the company's rules because, quote, they were on our side. Beverly Hallberg is president of District Media Group, and she joins us tonight. So, Beverly, thanks for coming on. The core story here is shocking or no?
Not as shocking as liberals want it to sound. Okay. So we really have liberals going after this story saying there's something here, this is the Trump campaign who figured out a way to mine data that they shouldn't have. But what the Trump campaign did is exactly what the Obama campaign did, what the Hillary campaign did. And what this is really about is Facebook, who was the poor actor. This was all before 2014, where Facebook, with the privacy policy we all sign up on, yes. Where we say, sure, you can have my data. That is all legal, but what they did at that point is they not only said to a third party, hey, with this app, you can have the person's data who agreed to it, but they also took the data of their friends. That is where the issue is. It's the privacy, not just of you, but also the privacy of those that you're connected with. That is the heart of this issue. What we find from campaigns, they're just using data that's out there. And when you even think about campaigns these days, people are on social media. This is where you need to have campaign ads. So it's not a data issue as far as the campaigns go. It's what Facebook did at that point in time when it comes to their privacy.
So Facebook also collects all kinds of data that you're not aware that it's collecting. For example, when you visit a store, Facebook knows that. Facebook can make assumptions about your net worth, about your personal life, and it sells those data to companies, correct? Typically.
We willingly give it, whether it's a Fitbit that you're putting information in. I use Waze to navigate traffic. I think about that and whether or not what is going to be used with that data. So we willingly give it, and I actually think, especially when it comes to parents, when you have children who are giving their information to apps.
Reflect what drives you. The 2018 Lexus NX.
Giving information information to Facebook and other social media platforms, you have to realize all of that is available to companies to sell. I think where this comes down to is the free market solving it. You already had a movement called Delete Facebook. I think that's why Mark Zuckerberg even came out today, 5 days after the scandal, to talk about what really took place, because I think the free market is going to solve this. Their stock dropped $50 billion. I think the free market is going to say, hey, I'm not going to use your platform if you're going to be selling my privacy in this way.
Finally, liberals are waking up to it. But I mean, more as a political matter, so Morning Joe has spent the last year and a half trying to figure out how Trump got elected.
Yeah.
And figure out there must have been something nefarious. It could have nothing to do with the idea that his ideas were popular with Americans. Like, that's not even on the table. Do you think Cambridge Analytica will be a satisfactory answer for them? Are they going to say, you know, this is how it happened?
It won't be a true satisfactory answer, but I think they may want to use it. I mean, Hillary Clinton is still on the tour trying to figure out what happened. Well, here's the thing. This is not your answer either, but this is what liberals are trying to do to try to prove he is not the actual candidate. The impeach Trump camp is still moving on this, but this is really nothing because Facebook already changed their policies.
Facebook is bad apart and aside from the Trump campaign. Okay, fair enough. Beverly, it's great to see you. Thank you. Well, the Austin serial bomber is dead. Who was he? What might have motivated him? That is next. And then our Men in America series, the third installment tonight. Fatherhood. It matters and it's dying. That's just ahead. This is a Fox News alert. The alleged perpetrator of the Austin bombings is dead. His name is Mark Anthony Condit. He died this morning after blowing up one of his own bombs as police closed in. His death hopefully means the end of a spree that killed 2, injured 6, and terrified the rest of the country. So what do we know so far about this man? So far, not very much. He was apparently homeschooled. Reports say he considered himself conservative as a teenager anyway. He worked as a computer repair specialist. Police say he left a 25-minute-long recording where he never mentioned his political views or terrorism or anything related to that. Instead, it was described as, quote, an outcry of a very challenged young man. Whatever that means, we don't know what it means. But, of course, when we find out, we'll tell you immediately. Well, in 2015, 2 Islamic extremists attacked a Muhammad cartoon contest in Garland, Texas. Fortunately, they were both killed by police before they killed anyone else. But it easily could have been a massacre, and it would have been thanks, believe it or not, to the FBI. An undercover agent egged on those attackers. He traveled with them to the attack site and then fled when the attack began. No effort was made by the FBI to stop the terrorists, and no warning was given to local police. Bruce Joyner was a security guard on the scene that day. He was shot in the attack. Not surprisingly, he's suing the FBI. He joins us tonight along with his attorney, Trenton Samuels. Thanks both very much for joining us. Bruce Joyner, first to you. This story is so incredible. It's so hard to believe that the FBI would have participated in something like that. I want to make sure I'm not misstating the facts in the open. Is that correct? An FBI agent accompanied these guys to the scene of the shooting?
Yes, he was in a vehicle behind their vehicle.
And Tucker, we also know that he was taking a picture at the exact spot of the shooting, in fact, of Bruce Joyner, seconds before the shooting broke out.
So what could possibly, and again, this story's been around for several years, but it hasn't really penetrated, I don't think, to the extent it should, into the public consciousness. What would possibly be the reason for the FBI knowing a terror attack was going to take place and allowing it to happen anyway?
Well, Tucker, what's interesting about it is the FBI in their court filings have said this wasn't a rogue agent. This wasn't, someone that went off of policy. He acted exactly according to their directions from the top down. And, and it's troubling because from the top down, we've seen problems with this story. Jim Comey, shortly after the attack, said that these guys were like needles in a haystack. In no way were they on the radar of the FBI, when in fact Elton Simpson, one of the 2 shooters, had been followed, had been monitored for years by the FBI. Hundreds of thousands of dollars had been spent investigating the exact individual who later carried on an attack like the one that they thought many years ago would take place. So it's odd for sure. So that's what it seems like.
Yeah, it sure does seem that way. So what's the identity of this FBI agent who was at the scene?
So that they went through painstaking efforts to keep his identity secret. In fact, he just recently testified in a related trial in Cleveland, and they cleared the courtroom. They took an unusual step in not allowing even any witnesses to watch him testify. You had to listen in via audio from the next room over. So he is their guy. I mean, they have owned him from start to finish, and from our perspective, it's a problem when he's the same guy who told these terrorists to tear up Texas days before the attack. He then seemingly is escorting them, holding their hand all the way to the attack, and then he's taking a picture when the attack takes place, and he tries to flee. And I mean, it's a very strange fact.
The whole point of this is to prevent terror attacks, and now we're sitting in the presence of a man who was shot in a terror attack, an American. Bruce, I mean, you were shot. What's your reaction to this? Does it seem like the country you grew up in?
No, this is former law enforcement, and this is not how you run undercover anything. You have to have control of the situation and make sure that no innocent people are harmed, and so this is not normal.
Have they, let me just ask the obvious question, which I think starting with. Have they apologized to you since you were shot in this operation?
No.
No, in no way have they apologized?
No.
That's disgusting. Gentlemen, I'm sure there's a lot to this that I don't understand, but they said I do. I really wish you luck in this lawsuit. I think all of us deserve to know what exactly happened. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tucker.
The decline of fathers in the home across the country is having devastating consequences for American men and for everyone else in the United States. Part 3 of our Men in America series is next. Plus, even Michael Moore totally fed up with hearing about Russia in the news. We'll tell you why. Stay tuned.
No, he's freaking like, kidding me?
Well, there are a lot of reasons that men are falling behind in this country, but a look at the numbers reveals one statistic that tracks the decline of American men almost precisely over time: the disappearance of fathers from the home. Between 1960 and 2016, the proportion of kids living with both parents decreased by almost 20%. The percentage of children living with only their mothers nearly tripled. In demographic terms, this is stunning. Changes to family structure this abrupt and profound typically are only seen in wartime. And yet, if anything, those numbers understate the reality of fatherlessness in America. In the high-income neighborhoods where journalists and policymakers tend to live, not a lot has changed. Most kids there still grow up with their fathers and mothers. But in the rest of the country, intact families are disappearing. According to a 2014 study by researchers at Johns Hopkins University, among younger parents without college degrees, 74% of mothers had at least one child outside of marriage. Out-of-wedlock births are now the rule across the country, not the exception. Increasingly, having a father at home is a sign of affluence, but it's also a cause of affluence, especially for boys. Boys who grow up with a father at home earn much more as adults. Boys who grow up alone with their mothers tend to earn less. They also have more disciplinary problems in school. They read less and less well. They're less likely to graduate from high school or go to college. They're more likely to be unemployed and to live in poverty. They get married less often, and when they do, they divorce more. They're more likely to be obese and have asthma. They're far more likely to abuse alcohol and drugs, exhibit antisocial behavior, and commit acts of violence. As adults, they're twice as likely to go to prison. Now, these numbers aren't the result of one study, but of numerous large studies done over generations. The results hold true across geography and ethnic groups. White and black, urban and rural, they're always true. Boys raised without their fathers are at terrible risk. There's not much serious academic debate about that, if any. The nationwide breakup of families is a disaster, and not just a moral disaster, but a practical one. It may be the largest public health crisis that we face. So what's driving it? Well, there are many factors. Falling male wages certainly play a role. Studies show that when men make less than women in their potential dating pool, women tend to consider them less attractive marriage partners. Fewer men marry, more children are born out of wedlock. Some government policies also discourage marriage, particularly among the poor. Women on welfare who marry often see their food.
Attending an open house is a really great way for someone to find out that Lambton College is a great fit, because you can have a recruiter come into your classroom and tell you all about Lambton, but you really need to come here and see it for yourself.
And housing subsidies cut dramatically. One recent report found that almost 1/3 of Americans know someone who hasn't married for fear of losing benefits. Broader changes in American culture have also had an effect on marriage and family formation. The dramatic decline in church attendance and religious observance is one of these. There are probably other reasons too. Fatherlessness is a hugely complex problem. But the point is, it is a problem, a massive one. And what is remarkable is how rarely that is acknowledged in public. When was the last time you heard a Democratic office holder decry the out-of-wedlock birth rate? If you cared about reducing poverty, you would talk about it a lot. But they don't. Why is that? Well, exit polling answers that question. Unmarried mothers are a critical part of the Democratic coalition. In 2008, Barack Obama won 74% of single mothers who voted. In 2012, he won 75%. Alienating these voters in any way is politically risky for Democrats, and so they ignore the problem entirely. Over time, the progressive left has become openly hostile to the institution of marriage. Once again, voting patterns explain why. It's been more than 20 years since a Democrat running for president won the majority of married women in America. Unmarried women, by contrast, vote overwhelmingly for Democrats. In 2012 and 2016, the Democratic Party platform never mentioned the importance of marriage except when advocating for gay marriage. In 2013, as she was preparing to run for president, Hillary Clinton shot a video tribute to single mothers. Quote, "Single moms are the real heroines," she said. "They need even more of the help that grandparents, aunts and uncles, and good friends can provide." The one group that Hillary didn't mention, biological fathers. Democrats who stray from this script tend to get attacked. Barack Obama spoke regularly and often eloquently about the importance of fatherhood, and yet, consistent with his party's orthodoxy, he said almost nothing about men marrying the mothers of their children. And that distinction is critical. Studies show that married fathers are by far most involved in their children's lives. You often hear our leaders refer to caring parents or grandparents or caregivers or some similar combination, as if the presence of any involved adult is enough for kids. But that's not true. At least for boys, the presence of a biological father in the house makes all the difference. On at least one occasion, Obama suggested that he understood this. In a 2003 speech about gun violence he gave in Chicago, Obama noted that, quote, "We should do more to promote marriage." Almost immediately, he was attacked from the left. An article in Ebony magazine suggested that Obama's remarks were racist. MSNBC ran an op-ed attacking him, and so on. He went back to platitudes. Hillary Clinton was right about one thing. Being a single mother is difficult. A lot of single mothers work incredibly hard, and they ought to be admired for that. But that doesn't mean that single motherhood is a good idea for society. It's not. It's a tragedy, especially for boys. And the rest of us ought to stop lying about that.
Dr. Warren Farrell has looked into this subject quite closely. He's the author of the book, The Boy Crisis, and he joins us tonight. Dr. Farrell, thanks a lot for coming on. So, we know pretty conclusively that men in America and in other developed countries are falling behind women in a lot of different measures. To what extent is fatherlessness driving that, do you think?
A great extent. They're falling behind women in all 63 leading nations, developed nations. And in developed nations, there's the permission for divorce that there isn't in non-developed, less developed nations. And also in developed nations, there's the permission for women to marry, to have children without being married. And that creates a huge division between boys and a division of boys who are with their fathers do quite well. Boys who are not with their fathers do terribly on more than 70 different measures of measures like postponed gratification, the ability to be, whether or not they're depressed, whether or not they're drinking, whether or not they have drugs, the opioid crisis, and even the people who are involved as ISIS recruits all over the world, they're almost completely fatherless boys, and the ones that are girls are also fatherless. And so everything you've been saying for the series has been right on target with the importance of having children be involved with both fathers. Mothers are doing a huge amount of wonderful, hard work, loving and caring for their children. That's why they deserve the biological father to be involved. And when we tell the biological father, not only are you important, but the way that you father.
Damn it.
Is important. The way that you enforce boundaries, the way that you encourage exploration, the way that you encourage kids to get up and try again, the way that you encourage adventure and risk-taking, the way that we can play together and create bonds. These are the things that mothers need to communicate, because when fathers are asked for and valued, they come back into the picture. When they're not, they drop out.
So it doesn't sound like anybody wins from fatherlessness. So if, if the trend is that fewer families are forming, more children are growing up without fathers at home, nobody benefits from that at all. Why aren't we sounding an alarm in this society about that, do you think?
I think we put so much focus, especially in the Democratic Party, on freedom for women. And freedom for women is a wonderful thing. I was in the board of directors of the National Organization for Women in New York City, as you know, for many years. But freedom for women stops when they make the free choice to have children. And then a different question has to emerge, which is what is best for the children. And what we see is evidence way beyond what I ever expected before I started doing the research for the boy crisis, is that children do best when there is not just a father, not just a male role model, but the biological father, and a biological father is far less likely to drop out of the process when there's marriage. 40% of even men and women who live together, who don't get married and have children, 40% of those fathers never see their children after 2 years.
Those are numbers that will offend people, but that's what the science tells us, and it's obvious all around us. I appreciate that, Doctor. Thanks for coming on and for that perspective.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Even Michael Moore.
We're fed up with the non-stop coverage of Russia, the most important story ever. Even he's sick of it. I wonder why. More on that next.
They had an amazing victory, the teacher strike. And Bernie, I didn't see hardly anything in the corporate media about this on any of the networks, even some of the networks that we watch, where, you know, Russia, turn the channel, Russia, 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 Russia. And I'm not saying that's not important.
I got storming Dan.
Yeah, okay. All the shiny keys to distract us. That's what goes on.
Get it. But he's absolutely right. When even left-wing standard bearers like Michael Moore, not a genius, find themselves annoyed by the year-long obsession with Russia, maybe something's going on. Will it change anything about the way news is covered? I don't know. Joe Concha writes about this stuff for a living. He joins us to predict. So, I mean, look, presumably this guy, you know, he doesn't like the administration. He's got every incentive to want to cheer on the endless coverage of Russia. But even he's tired of it. Is there a limit to how much